Welcome to week 6 of Technology, Life Balance, and Addiction. This week we're going to be focusing on steps to health and recovery. This is Andrew Sears, the instructor for the course. Wanted to start off with a little bit of review from last week, but also trying to apply what we learned last week. The concept that, whenever you see a problem, it's only the tip of the iceberg and there's other layers below it. Last week we talked about this in very general terms, that there might be, nature versus nurture, physical, social, all sorts of causes. But what I want to do is I want to talk about a specific case, pornography addiction, and I'm using some examples both from myself and from other people that I've known. So you take a problem with pornography addiction, and there's actually going to be underlying causes of that. So for me, one of the biggest drivers of pornography addiction actually was, I would say, a more core addiction, and that's around workaholism. And what it would do is it would exacerbate my stress, and then I would need some sort of relief. So the other things that I've seen both in myself and others, poor media nutrition, if I'm watching TV or playing games all the time, watching TV would expose me to toxic hits. Playing games would actually add to my stress because I wasn't relaxing. And the other thing is just poor boundaries. Like I'm someone who I don't like rules. I grew up in a legalistic family, and because of that, I think that I like to have no rules. But there's times whenever you need to have boundaries for yourself, and so that can be a part of the problem. And then there's physical causes. So for myself, one of the biggest physical causes was actually poor nutrition. So poor nutrition made me feel bad. Whenever I felt bad, I wanted to self-medicate. I also found out that I had a vitamin deficiency in vitamin B, and as I mentioned before, that's actually very common for people, and one of the most common causes of all types of addictions is just vitamin deficiency that actually came from my own genetics. It's also very common. Drivers for addiction are, and you could be anywhere on the spectrum of ADHD. There's some people who are amazingly gifted entrepreneurs. They always joke saying I'm a little bit ADHD, but the truth is, often you are a little bit ADHD. And for me, I like to do a lot of things. I have to, be intentional about focusing. And so for people who have that background, it's also a big issue because the cause of ADHD is problems with dopamine, and all these things you get addicted to, whether it be pornography, games, media, are dopamine fixes. So you're getting your dopamine in an unhealthy way. Another cause for me, as I've mentioned in the past, is PTSD. I grew up in a trauma-filled environment. Another thing that contributed was I didn't have very much exercise. There's been times in my life whenever I've had limited self-care, especially whenever I was younger, I thought it was bad to do any self-care, that it was selfish, not realizing that, God loves me and that God wants me to take care of myself. And there's other times whenever it's easy to neglect the spiritual life. And then another one is just having few strong relationships or conflict in relationships is causes. So those are causes, but those are easily, more easily seen. So, if you're going into counseling, this would be your first, few years of what sorts of things that you would deal with in counseling. But then under that's your underlying worldview, and these are the things that sometimes, but for a miracle, sometimes can take decades to heal. And for me, coming from an urban environment, high trauma environment, some of the areas of my own worldview that was broken is that the world's unsafe, and that I have to protect myself. Growing up, there wasn't anyone else to protect me. Another thing is, if you come from a shame-based culture, shame-based background, then almost by definition, in most of the United States and a lot of the Western world is shame-based. Is you need to prove your value by what you do. We're human doings, not human beings. And then a third one is that people cannot be trusted. I'm safer alone. A fourth one is God will not really protect and provide for me. And these are broken aspects of the worldview, because what we're really You know, often we would never say I believe those things, but if you look at how you feel and how you act on a day-to-day basis, those are core beliefs. I just watched the movie Inside Out, and it talks about core memories. And if you get core beliefs that are off, then that's something that's going to create a challenge. So what you have to do, and one of my favorite stories in the Bible is when the disciples tried to cast out the demon, and Jesus said this one can only come out by prayer and fasting. And how did he know that? Well, I think Jesus was discerning, but depending on what the cause is, you're going to have a different need, or a different way to approach that, treatment of addiction. If you try taking vitamins and your problem is workaholism, then the vitamins aren't going to help your workaholism. But at the same time, if you have some sort of biochemical problem and you just try to think happier thoughts, and you don't take care of your nutrition, you don't take the vitamins you need, and you don't exercise, then it's going to be a lot more difficult to just think happier thoughts. So you have to do the work, depending on what the cause is. Another story from my own experience was a couple years ago I had an appendicitis, and if my stomach started hurting really bad, and I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe it was something I ate, but a lot of Christians could have came around me and said, "Oh, we just need to pray. We need to get that demon out of you." Well, you know what? A lot of times it is a demon, a lot of times it's spiritual, but if they had done that, I would have died. So a lot of times there's a physical cause to it, and so that's just a gross example of, if you're trying to treat something with the wrong treatment, then it can cause problems. So you need to be discerning on what things are, what issues are. So so in the material this week, I would, just want to tie together some things, the different talks. One is a fantastic, probably the best talk I've ever heard on overcoming temptation by Bill Mooney McCoy, and that is, I would say, it complements this. This is the big picture, and that is if you're dealing with some specific things in temptation. One of the lessons that I want you to learn from this course is that there's a lot of ways that people are using, tools against us. In this, one of the talks you listened to was how people engineer addiction, but you can actually also engineer your health. So two of the things that you're going through this week, BJ Fogg, he gave a TED talk on tiny habits. He's one of the top researchers in the world on behavior, and Hooked is by the guy who wrote the book on that a lot of people use to get you addicted to games. But what I found was interesting is the case study that he used was the Bible app, YouVersion Bible app, and this is by a non-Christian. And what he's saying is, you can use these tools to get yourself addicted, but you can also use them for help. And for people who are often have tech addictions, surprisingly, having the same type of hooks and the same type of reminders that might drive you towards unhealth can also drive you towards health. So I want to talk a little bit more about the Fogg behavioral model that was talked about by DJ Fogg, because I think this model is actually central, probably the most helpful thing, one graph that I've seen in helping people understand addiction. So the basic idea on this, just to recap, and you should have already watched the Tiny Habits video where he talked about this, is there's really two things, two variables that you can control. I guess somewhat three variables. So there's how much motivation you have towards an addictive behavior, or a positive habit, and then there's how easy the behavior is, and the ability. So I might be motivated. I'd really like to be an NBA, be able to play for the NBA, but I just don't have the ability. So that would be very high up here, on the difficult ability. So, no matter how much my motivation is, I'm not gonna to do that, and I'm not gonna quit my job to, try to do that. Um, but then there's a lot of other things that might be easy to do. Like I want to watch Netflix. Netflix is everywhere. So, you know, it doesn't take much motivation to do that, or to check your Facebook, or things along those lines. So people at Stanford, and these two researchers who talk about this stuff this week, they're at Stanford and they're teaching all the people who are engineering these games that are addictive. They're also encouraging people to use it for good, but a lot of people aren't using it for good. And so what Fogg says is that you need to have three things to get a behavior. You need to have motivation, you need to have the ability, and then a trigger. So a trigger would just be something that reminds you. And what this curve shows is there's some things that are really hard, that take a lot of motivation, and then there's other things that are you know so the things over on the left side of the graph, would be very hard to do. And then the things that are on the right side of the graph are very easy to do. So say you're highly motivated to get some water, and you have water right in front of you, you're going to get the water, right? So, but if you're highly motivated to get water and you're in the middle of the desert, then you're not going to be able to have the behavior of drinking water. So part of why this is important, and a lot of people are saying, why are addictions getting worse? Well, the fundamental reason is as technology advances, technology is making everything easier to do. So it's making pornography more accessible. It used to be that you had to go to a store, adult store to look at pornography. But now every person has the world's largest pornography library in their pocket, on their desk at all times. So if you work with computers, it's often like being a recovering alcoholic that works in a bar, and that makes things really difficult. Um, Other things, drug addiction is becoming, more accessible. People are finding more ways to make drugs. Sex addiction, you have, more websites that make it easier for sex addiction. In general, just all addictions are becoming easier to do. But on the plus side, it's all opportunities for the gospel, and actually all opportunities for health too are getting easier to do. So what I want to do is I want to relate this Fogg behavioral model to what we talked about on the addiction cycle. Now I've changed this a little bit to try to make it a little bit more related to the Fogg behavioral model. So let me just go through the steps of this. So you have some sort of stress. It'll start at the top. So you have some sort of stress, and I'm calling that the motivation. So what motivates you towards addiction is some sort of stress in your body. So that's the motivation in the Fogg behavioral model. And then you have the ability to do something. So if it is impossible, if there were no such thing as cocaine, then you're not going to get high on cocaine. Or if you don't have access to it, you don't have money, you're not going to get high on cocaine. And people have actually developed and test a vaccine that would make it impossible for you. Once you've taken this vaccine, you would never be able to get high on cocaine again. So you can take away your ability. Now the problem is, if you increase your motivation, then you're going to find something else to be addicted to. And the other thing you can do is take away the trigger. So, for you, that might be watching TV, and all of a sudden you're watching a show that has some scantily clad women, and you think, oh, I could, watch something worse. Or you might be looking at a news article and it has something racy in it, and you click on it. At the bottom of all the news articles now, they have, scantily clad women, because they get paid by the number of times you click, so they want to keep you clicking. So they're essentially encouraging you to be addicted in that. So you have triggers. So then you act out. So that could be, with pornography addiction, it could be with gaming addiction, it could be with alcohol, drugs, and then you have this guilt and shame. And then what you do is, because you're living and you have a core belief, going back to the previous diagram, you have a core belief that you need to prove yourself. Often what you do is you end up performing. So that's where the workaholism, that's where, trying to be too rigid in your life, trying to be hard on yourself, trying to punish yourself, um, and not doing self-care. And what that does is that actually increases your stress. And then, eventually, you're going to be able. So the question is, how do you stop this cycle? Now, part of the reason why I like the Fogg behavioral model is it shows that there's multiple points to breaking the cycle, and one of these isn't in that model. It's actually, comes out of the Christian model. But I think the biggest thing is that everyone focuses on, it's you're sitting in front of the Big Mac and you're starving and you're saying, I'm not going to eat the Big Mac. Or, you're an alcoholic and you're at the bar and all your friends are getting drunk and you're saying, I'm not going to do it. Or, you're alone at night and you're hungry and you're tired and you're watching, some show you shouldn't be watching, and then you end up looking at porn. That's the wrong place. You already have the stress, the motivation, the ability, and the trigger, and you're just doing pure willpower. And there's been a lot of studies that have shown that pure willpower is going to last you about 20 minutes. So if you're saying, I'm going to be sober for a whole week, well, you got 20 minutes of what's called white knuckling it, of resisting it, that's going to last you. You get about 20 minutes a day of just doing pure willpower. But if your whole day is full of stress, motivation, ability, and trigger, you're just not going to last. So you don't focus there. There's three other points where you can focus. So one is on the guilt and shame. And I want to share a story of whenever I first started to follow Jesus again. I'd been away from Jesus for a while, and I had been in a lot of sexual relationships. And I started following Jesus. I'd been following Jesus for about a year and a half, and I was living with some Christian roommates. And I went on a business trip, and I actually fell, and I had a one-night stand on the business trip. And I came back, and I was just so incredibly ashamed because I'd been, sober for a while, and I just really messed up. And I told my roommates, and I was expecting them. I came from, a legalistic background. I was expecting them to just shame me, tell me what a horrible person I was, and they said, "Wow, that's really sad. I'm sorry that happened to you." Um, and I thought, well, don't you want to punish me? What they did is they gave me grace and they prayed for me. And what that did, after having that repeated again and again in my life, how do you change these worldviews? Well, part of how you change the worldviews is you live in a world that's going to give you grace again and again and again, so you don't have to do the performance. So, I've been in recovery since 1996, so almost 19 years. And as doing that, it's getting a drink of grace, and then doing less on the performance side. Now, on the performance side, rather than performing, what you can do is, so if you do the performance, you really got two options that you can get to a stop sign. So you can do self-care and healthy habits and recovery, or you just keep performing, and then you move on to the next step, which is stress. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to decrease the motivation for addiction. So how you decrease the motivation for addiction is through self-care, healthy habits, and recovery. And then, so say you have the stress, and you're going to have stress in life. You can't just say, I'm going to live a stress-free life. How do you avoid, what you want to avoid is having too much stress chronically, if at all possible. But if you have a lot of stress, and you're always going to have stress, how do you protect yourself? Well, you avoid the having the ability and the trigger. So there were seasons whenever my life was just not going that well, and I couldn't have a computer in my house that I used. I unplugged my computer, and I've had a lot of people who they have pornography addiction, and they will make it so that they don't have smartphones at home. They'll leave their phone in their car. They'll make it so that they don't have computers at home. Um, they'll only use computers in public places. So you can have boundaries, and there's a lot of other boundaries that we'll talk about. So those are your three stop signs. White knuckling it is not your stop sign. So that's the biggest change to recommend both for yourself and for others. The other thing I want to talk about is, the role of grace in unlinking addiction. So we talked about this, you have addictions that get linked. So you can have a sexual, or in my case, it was a link between pornography addiction and work addiction. And the link there is shame and performance, right? So you feel ashamed and you're going to perform. So, to unlink the addictions, what you have to have is you have to have grace. So a lot of what you're trying to do is you're trying to unlink addictions, and there's a lot of addictions that get linked. Gaming addiction is huge on pornography addiction, where you'll be involved in games that just add to your stress, that stress you out. High twitch games is what they're called. And and another one is just, if you have, television, you watch too much television, or you watch, unhealthy television or unhealthy websites, then that's going to drive you, towards pornography. So what are the strategies to decrease the motivation to act out? So ultimately, you got, what you can do is try to have healthy habits and self-care. So what you can do is limit factors that increase motivation for addiction. So stress is obviously the big one, but isolation. In the recovery groups that you go to, you'll often hear this term HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So if my brain starts thinking, wouldn't that be good right now? And I don't have a tendency towards alcoholism, but it's like the alcoholic who says, a drink would be really good right now. Wouldn't it be good to, use porn, or to, use whatever, if you have a food problem, wouldn't it be good to go, eat some ice cream, or go get something else? And you have to ask, do you have one of these or more than one of these things? Are you hungry? Are you angry? Are you lonely? And are you tired? So part of what happens is you have to do, self-care is about monitoring your day-to-day condition. And if you're out of touch with your emotions like I was, then you don't even really think about, are you hungry? You don't think about, are you angry? You don't think about, are you tired? If you get all four of these, then you're going to be wanting to, or you get three, or sometimes two, or even one that's strong enough, you're going to want to turn to something else. Now, part of what happens with the alcoholic is that the alcoholic, what happens, we talk about these different we talk about these different causes, and with the alcoholic is they learn that alcohol will solve all their problems. If they're hungry, you can use alcohol. If I'm stressed, I'll use alcohol. If I'm isolated, I'll use alcohol. But that's not the actual cause. You got to treat the cause, and that's the problem. Is we learn one magic thing, and what that is it's an idol, whether it's television or whatever. If you're using that to make it so that you don't feel that thing rather than meeting the actual need. So some of the other things to limit the factors, or I guess I should have said this, decrease the factors towards motivation. Boredom. So or just idleness, toxic exposure. You're watching TV and you see someone who's scantily clad, or you're watching a movie with some nudity, or just lack of health in other areas. So physical, media, spiritual. And then the other thing you can do is promote healthy habits that decrease motivation for addiction. So prayer, exercise. So this all follows into the self-care category. Prayer, exercise, relaxation, journaling, activities that just basically anything that renews you. Each person's different, so what renews you? And I don't really believe just sitting and watching TV. Sitting and watching TV at best is neutral, but it's not something that, wow, I feel like a new person after that, right? If a lot of times after you go exercise, you feel, wow, I feel great after that. You don't feel good during it. Good nutrition, having healthy relationships, being involved in small groups, Bible studies, recovery, Another thing you can actually do that decrease motivation is decrease the benefit of acting out. So, I have, accountability partners, and even with myself, you go, and part of what I say is, if you fall quickly. Don't fall so that you have an 8-hour binge, because then, physically, you're going to have a much stronger physical addiction because you just had 8 hours, but you're also maximizing your benefit, and that's going to make you more addicted. So you don't want to do that. Along with that is detox. So, after you've been sober long enough, then the biological drive is going to decrease. So then you have other nutritional and biochemical things that I've already mentioned, with whether it be vitamins or just eating better. And then, the last thing is just having increased meaning and purpose in life. And I think that's one of the biggest things. So it can be really hard to just say no. That's where the drug war failed. But what you want to do is you want to just say yes. So there's a couple lessons out of this that I want to draw. So one is a lesson from David and Bathsheba. And you look at, when was David in trouble? It wasn't whenever he was at war. I mean, David had some great things that he did in the kingdom. He was, one of the best stories in the Bible of someone following God. He said he had his heart was after God's own heart. But whenever he wasn't on God's mission, he got distracted. So if you're focused on greater things of heaven, then you're not going to have as much temptation. The other thing, and I love this quote from C.S. Lewis, is it says, "It seems that our Lord finds our desires not too strong but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at the sea. We are far too easily pleased." So I've seen how this is lived out in my life. So it's not that God doesn't want us to have feelings. He wants us to have desires for the good things. But a lot of us haven't been exposed to those good things, but that's what we need to add, is we need to get healthier things in our life. So I'll tell a little bit of my story around health. So, before I had kids, I ate really bad. I watched tons of TV. I played lots of video games. And to be honest, I had a much bigger pornography problem, because I didn't have health in the other areas of my life. So after I had kids, I had a big conversion that I'll talk a little bit more about on nutrition, where I dramatically changed how I ate. And the reason why is because I got to the point where I just had too much in my life. I wasn't able to survive work and my kids, and I could barely get through the day without needing to take a nap. And what I wanted to do is, I had things at work that were really important that I wanted to do, making a difference in the world. And I had things with my family, my kids, they needed me. And that was motivating for me. So, having those things that's positive. Many people, they're not in relationships and they want a relationship. You gotta test the waters there, and it's wanting that positive relationship that will drive you to get rid of these imaginary relationships. And now the other part of the reason, I've continued to improve my media diet, and part of the reason for that is I have this huge passion to learn. And now I spend a lot of my time, I'm teaching all these courses for City Vision, and I need to, continue to improve in my role as president of City Vision, on how to run the school. So I'm learning all the time, trying to maximize my media use, and I'm also learning tons about parenting and family. And it's because I'm motivated for those things. So we need to be motivated for the positive and not just the negative. So that's around the motivation. Now, I want to talk about a little of my own story around nutrition and weight loss. So, I mentioned with my kids, I went through this radical conversion, and I came from Kansas City, which used to be the obesity capital of the country, ate horribly, and I took pride in it. And I got to the point where I couldn't keep up with my kids. I couldn't keep up with my work. I had to take a nap every day. happened, around the time that I was starting to get older, in my 40s, and I learned a lot about nutrition, and so here's the summary of what I learned is I learned what not to do. What not to do is you don't just try to eat less. Trying to eat less is like I said, you're trying to do that. You get 20 minutes of white knuckling it, and that's what I tried to do up to that. Um, Trying to eat less is not at all effective. What has been effective for me is just creating boundaries around what to eat. Um, and both positive and negative. So I have given up all sugary drinks, 100% sugary drinks. I don't drink sugary drinks at all. If there's any one thing you could do for your health, I would say that's it. Um, Number two, though, is I limit my desserts. I rarely eat desserts. Um, so that is harder. But just giving up all sugary drinks, it's like saying I don't drink alcohol or something. I just don't drink anything that comes from Coca-Cola for the most part. Um, the other thing that I learned is eat foods that keep you full. So I'm someone who I have a high metabolism. I got to eat a lot, and so that's part of the reason why I chose a diet to go with. It's called paleo. So in paleo, and it works with my background from the Midwest. You eat tons of meat. Meat keeps you full for a long time. So with this, I think the same things apply for media. Avoid the sugary media. Use your media use should be things that really fulfill you. Avoiding the empty calories. That's actually the biggest thing. Is I've actually gone on avoiding all wheat. And part of what that's done is and what they say is avoid the white foods, the refined foods. I mean, white rice is probably the best of the white, but any white bread, honestly, wheat bread is still just white bread in a different form. So, pasta, all those things. So what I did is I replaced my empty calories carbs largely with meat and some vegetables. Now, the part that I probably do the least good on my nutrition is the vegetables. And I found out I love salad, so I'll have a salad each day. But there's not that many other vegetables that I like. So that's a challenge. And you're going to find, as you do things, there's different types of media and different routines that will work with you. The other thing I learned in my nutrition and weight loss is I learned that the battle's at the supermarket. And you never go shopping while you're hungry. You go shopping down while you're hungry, and you're going to go down the aisle with all the cookies, and you're going to buy them all, right? And what you do is you buy healthy things. You don't bring home Oreos. So if you only buy healthy things, you're going to be at home and you're going to be jonesing, and your ability to act out is going to be decreased, right? And the other thing you do to decrease your ability to act out and to eat unhealthy is you plan ahead. You make sure that you have lots of options, lots of healthy options. You cook meals. I'm not as good at planning ahead. My wife's a lot better at planning ahead. And you just make a rule. I'm not going to eat fast food, because and if you keep yourself full, the reason why you go to eat fast food and often you get really hungry and you need to eat something quick. So if you plan ahead, then you won't eat fast food. So the reason why I use these stories isn't just to help people lose weight, which if that's one of your co-addictions, then I would say do that. And for me, I wouldn't say it was addiction, but I just had poor health. And through this, over a period of probably 6 months, 6 to 9 months, I lost 40 pounds and went from needing to take a nap every day to not needing caffeine at all. And I also added to that, I run every morning. And I would say I probably have about 150% the energy that I had before, maybe even twice the energy that I had before. So I get tons more done, and that's what makes it worth it. So you can do this change, in your own regular media, but I've also seen the same thing happen in my own use of media, and And I would say it's not by chance that my physical nutrition got better at the same time my media nutrition, because as I was feeding my mind better, I was actually learning more about health, and that was one of the major areas that I focused on, and that helped my physical nutrition, and the two reinforced each other. So I want to talk a little bit about several quotes that are helpful for framing. Everyone's heard this phrase, "You are what you eat." Um, the Another phrase that comes from the Bible is "as a man thinks, so is he." That's Proverbs 23:7 paraphrased. So if you're spending all your time focused on media, then whatever media you're focused on, that's what you're going to become. Marshall McLuhan, who actually is a Christian, he termed it this way, and he's kind of like the big guru around media ecology. He established the field largely, and he said, "We become what we behold." So we become what we watch. Or another way is we become what we worship. So the idea is that your brain is going to be what you're spending time in media on. And this is just kind of a funny Calvin Hobbes cartoon, where you can see him worshiping in front of the television. And he's saying, "This bowl of lukewarm tapioca represents my brain. I offer it in humble sacrifice. Bestow thy flickering light forever." Now, that's a funny cartoon, but I actually think whenever we spend, if someone spent 20 hours a week in front of a statue of Buddha and they said they were a Christian, you would probably be like, "What? That doesn't make sense," right? But you spend 20 hours a week in front of a box sitting in your living room, and what are you doing? Well, you're worshiping whatever is in that box. Now, there's nothing wrong with some television, but if it's taking priority over other things in your life, and it has to, because you only have a limited number of hours, and if your life, if it makes your life out of balance, then we need to shift that. So that's what this week's about. This week is, how do we shift that? And the idea isn't that, okay, you're either an addict or you're not. That's like saying you're either you know in perfect health, or you're completely non healthy. Now there's some people who have food addiction, but everyone can afford to eat healthier. Same thing with media nutrition. So there's so what I'm going to go through in the second part of this talk is I'm going to go through the exercise for this week, and it's actually focused on creating a media nutrition plan. And what it's really focusing on is decreasing your ability to act out. So the motivations, that's some bigger things you're going to have to do throughout all of your life. If you have too much stress, if you have self-care, that's going to be something that I would encourage you to still come up with a plan for that. But this is really focused on your ability to act out and your overall media nutrition. So step one is you replace your empty, sugary, and toxic media with nutritious media. Now, what we're going to do is I'll show you how to do this in the spreadsheet. And then you develop a daily media plan. So there's going to be a tab, and I'll show you the tab in the spreadsheet of what you're going to commit to. But you're also going to write it out. And then 3, you're going to commit to boundaries. 4, you're going to clean up your media environment. And 5, you're going to develop tools and routine for positive media nutrition. And let me just kind of walk you through each of these steps. So there's going to be a media nutrition goals and narrative, and I'll go ahead and increase this here for you if I can. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So this is this week's assignment, and step 1 is to replace empty, sugary, toxic media with nutritious media. Now, so what you're going to do here is you're going to identify blocks of time where you're using empty, sugary, or toxic media. and to try to replace those with nutritious media over time. And one of the things, part of the reason why I had you watch Tiny Habits is the way I've made these shifts in my personal diet um, and in my media diet and media nutrition is I've taken a few at a time. So for me, I changed my commute. As an example, my commute, I used to not really listen to anything that was that beneficial, so I changed my commute so that I listen to educational and sermons. So that's just an example. So what you're going to do is you're going to review your media log narrative from your previous assignment, and you're going to try to identify frequent blocks of time where you're using empty, sugary, toxic media. So it could be after work or after dinner you always watch TV, or you might have a workout, and you might think, what, I could listen to something, a sermon or something during my workout. Now, you don't have to overprogram yourself to where you're listening to something all the time, but the point is that if you're going to be taking in nutrition media, then have it be beneficial for you in one way or another. And what you want to do is you want to do goals that you can actually do. So following the tiny habit method. So here's just some examples. Some of these are fairly big, so you might do smaller, but so and I'll just go through the goals. Replace listening to trashy music on morning commutes with listening to a sermon podcast. Replace video games or watching TV after dinner with reading either educational book or the Bible. Attend church small groups rather than watching TV. Attend a meetup, if you're familiar with meetups.com, on Tuesday. And I'm suggesting that you say a specific time, plan it out. For me, here's some of the goals that I set. Spend at least 1 hour playing with my children 4 nights a week. Go on a date with my spouse every other week. Go on a half an hour walk in nature at least twice a week. Exercise daily for half an hour. So those are things that you can do. So what I want you to do, and pick 2 or 3 and make them your own. Don't just copy these. These are just samples. So step 2, you're going to develop a plan. So step 1 is kind of like, okay, here's my goals of what I'm going to replace. But step 2, you're going to say, here's what I'm going to do. And what I want you to do is to have weekday goals and probably a weekend goal. And here there's going to be 2 parts of your plan. One part of your plan is going to be to write it out. The other part is going to be within the spreadsheet. So what you're going to do is you'd write out, and this is actually my media routine for each day. Each weekday day, I get up and I listen to either a sermon or an educational talk while going on a morning run for about a half an hour. Then I'll listen to music while worshiping and praying for about a half an hour. So then usually I'll check email and news for 15 minutes in the morning. I will then listen to a sermon or educational talk in my morning and evening commutes for about 45 minutes. And I work during the day, which I don't use any other media during the day. Except maybe on my lunch break I'll read some news. Other than, I don't use any other media other than work-related media. And then at night I'll read either educational or fiction book for 30 minutes before bed. And that's pretty much every day what my media use. I might spend 5 or 10 minutes watching a TV show with my kids, and maybe one day a week watch a movie with them. And that's usually on Saturday. And the idea is you want to get a routine of something that you're going to do. As a part of that, also, you're going to have you're going to enter that. So after you do your weekdays, what I want you to do is I want you to have goals for your hourly use. So in this sample, you're going to say, on a weekday, I'm going to try to get 1 hour of worship in Christian music. I'm going to try to get 1 hour of educational time. I'm going to try to get so many hours of working, so many hours of live personal interaction. So after you do that part where you write the narrative, I want you to enter this for the weekdays and the weekends. Enter in the numbers, and then you can also set goals for producing and consuming media if you want. But I think the biggest thing I want you to focus in is the top half. So then after you do that, I want you to commit to boundaries. And as you'll hear in Bill Mooney McCoy's, the idea on a boundary is this is something you're not going to be on the fence. You either are doing it or you're not doing it. So if you're unsure, then don't put it as a boundary. But if you're going to make it a boundary, like I said, I do not do sugary drinks at all. So don't be on the fence. So here's just some examples of boundaries, and actually the book, The Digital Invasion, pages 154 to 158, and I think a little bit after that actually has some good examples on boundaries. But don't use mobile phone while with children. That's something I've had to watch. It can be an issue where my children are just doing something and I'm kind of bored, and there's that pull. I need that dopamine fix, right? So I think, oh, I'll check my email to see whether you check your email, it gives you a dopamine hit. You check Facebook, it gives you a dopamine hit. And so another one is don't use mobile phone except with headset when car is moving while driving. That's I don't text while driving, but there might be other times whenever I'm essentially distracted because I'm trying to flip through something. So I just need to be more careful. Keep mobile phone out of reach when in bed. So this has actually probably been the #1 most helpful thing for me in the past couple of years. It used to be that I'd wake up in the middle of the night and all of a sudden I'd be tempted. And that's kind of like, if you're an alcoholic, it's like going to bed with a beer by your bed. Or if you have a food addiction, it's like putting a bunch of Oreos next to your bed and saying, I'm not going to eat Oreos when I wake up. That's just not a good idea. So what I decided, and it's funny how, changing the ability minorly, all I have to do is walk, 3 feet across the room to my dresser. But it has eliminated 90% or 99% of the temptation while I'm in bed. So another thing is I've pretty much uninstalled all games and sources of temptation on my smartphone. So if something becomes a source of temptation, then I uninstall it. It killed me recently. There was a news app that was my favorite news app, but every now and then it would have a news article that would show something, like that I didn't want to look at. And I uninstalled it and put it to where I don't access it. But uninstalling the games and things along those lines, it's basically saying I'm not going to make an investment on those things. Some other examples, don't do any non-work computer activities at work except during lunch break. No television or games on weekdays. Another one I do is I go anytime I go into a hotel. I'm actually getting ready to travel next week, and this is the first thing I'll do. As soon as I walk into the hotel, I unplug the television, and it's because I don't want to be tempted. In hotels they have video on demand where you can look at pornography, and just the simple act makes it clear to myself that I've made that decision, and it makes it a little bit harder. So I'm not going to accidentally be flipping through the channels and say, "Oops, look what I found." And that again has eliminated most of the temptation. So another one is have Covenant Eyes on computers. Covenant Eyes, what it does is it tracks all your computer use, and it will send what you go to your accountability partner. So if you do something stupid, it will send exactly how stupid you are. Talk to an accountability partner weekly. This is probably the #1 out of this entire exercise that I would say. Contact them when in major temptation and confess within 24 hours of any incident. Another positive thing you could do is subscribe to a Bible reading plan in YouVersion's Bible app and set reminders. I probably should have put that in the earlier positive media. Keep computer windows closed when journaling on a computer. I journal on my computer because I like to type for journaling, but if I had a web browser open, I'd be like, oh, let me check Facebook, and it's the whole ADHD thing going on. Don't check anything on my smartphone or computer during prayer times. And a lot of friends I've had is don't have unfiltered computer access or smartphone in their home. So that's some examples. The other is clean up your media environment. So that there's really two options of what you might do. It might be a limited time fast. So, you hear about people going on a media fast. You fast for Facebook. A lot of people who fast from things for Lent, they'll fast for Facebook from Lent. Or you might fast from games, or I've heard of people fasting from their cell phones for all things except for maybe directions and using it as a phone. Isn't wouldn't that be funny if we just use our phones for phones, right? So the other thing is removing all games from your smartphones and Facebook indefinitely. I did that, one of the best decisions I ever did, because if the games are there, man, I'm going to use them. And especially once if I get addicted to a game, I've taught my son about getting addicted to games, and the rule in our family is if anyone gets addicted to games where it has a pull on them, where they're just playing a lot, then it gets uninstalled. So when my son does that, there's a time I was playing a game Crudes with him, and it's funny, I got more addicted to it than him, and he said, "Dad, you're addicted to games." And I said, you know what, you're right, and I uninstalled it. It hurt, man. I built up my Crudes character so much, right? And anyone who plays games knows what I'm talking about. But I uninstalled it. Another example is, you know, my wife and I, we canceled our cable TV subscription, replaced it with Netflix. What cable TV is it's kind of like having an all-you-can-eat card that anytime you go to McDonald's, you get all you can eat. And you say, you know what, I want to have better media nutrition, or I want to have better nutrition. Why are you subscribing to McDonald's? So, not that all cable TV is bad, but one of the big advantages of on demand is that you can control it. So the other part, it's just too easy for them to push media to you. And what a lot of people don't realize is that on television, what's the product? In terms of a business, what's the product on television? What's the product also for Facebook? It's not the shows. The shows are a means to an end. The product is you. They're your eyes. They're selling you. If you have your kids watching cable television, they're selling your kids to companies that want to persuade you to buy things you don't want. So, my children actually hardly know what a commercial is. The few times that they we travel, they'll be, watch some TV in the hotel room, and they're like, "Daddy, what is that?" And I tell them, "That's a commercial." And then, like all kids do, they say, "Ooh, I really want that," because, they're manipulating your kids. So my kids don't want a lot of these stupid toys that a lot of other kids want, because they don't even know they exist, because we only do Netflix. Um, so step 4 is clean up your media environment. That's like, what I said, where if, the battle, if you're trying to lose weight, is whenever you go shopping. Um, and you shop while you're hungry. So the step 5 is to develop tools and routines to invest in positive media nutrition. So subscribe to Covenant Eyes. One of the things I do is I'll spend some time each week where I download sermons, and I'll download sermon apps. If whoever your favorite pastor is, there's a good chance that, or author, there's a good chance they have an app. Almost all the mega churches have apps. So Saddleback Church or Willow Creek, or different. I listen to Bethel, so it's iBethel, with Bill Johnson, and I'll listen to that, or educational apps, TED Talks, or there's a lot of other things that you can get, or subscribe to sermons or educational podcasts. So I've subscribed to a lot of sermons, and the idea is it's like having a salad delivered to you, and you think, you know what, I need to listen to this sermon because it's there in my queue, and I need to do it. The other thing I do is I do a YouTube playlist. And there's a button in YouTube where you just say, watch later, or you can create separate playlist. And what I do is I will put things on a playlist, and then I'll, whenever I'm commuting, and whenever I'm working out, then I'll go to it. Now there is a secret on finding things that's really going to be beneficial. Most stuff on YouTube is junk. So here's how I use YouTube: is I'll find a book I want to read, and in the old days you'd have cliff notes. Now what you have is you have the author giving a talk on that book. So in any given week, I probably come across 3 to 5 books I want to read. I look up every time I find a book that I want to read. I look them up on YouTube. I'll sometimes look them up on Vimeo, um, and I'll put them on my playlist, and then I'll listen to them while I'm running. I'll listen to them during my commute. I don't watch them during my commute, but I'll listen to them on my commute. And I have, I've gone through, probably 100 books over the past year where I just get the Cliff Notes version, and I'll use that. If it's really good, I'll actually go get the book. Now, some of you may have issues with having full access to YouTube, and if you have pornography addiction, then this may not be the best approach to you. So you may just decide that's not a good approach. Some of the other things you can do is I have an online account with my library, so I use it to make online reservations. I visit the library once a week, and on any given time I'm visiting the library, I'm taking in 5 books, I'm checking out 5 books. And I just, now almost all library systems, you can just reserve it online and they'll have it for you up front. I have access to tons of books, so that I do have the problem of I always have more books than I can read. But it's basically like saying you have an all-you-can-eat salad bar. The idea is that you're trying to create an all-you-can-eat salad bar with really good food for you at all times. So some of the other apps that you can get, Hoopla, a lot of libraries have. I just discovered it in the past few months. It has a lot of books like Audible. Audible is actually another good one too. It has a lot of audiobooks. Hoopla has other stuff, but the best thing is their audiobooks, because they have an amazing audiobook Christian library. They also have a good library around educational and personal development. And then Overdrive also has a lot of books, audiobooks that you can get. So you can improve your access to media. And then another one is Zenio. I use this for a little bit, and you can get educational magazines from your library. These days most magazines actually are trashy, and Zenio could be a source, but for some of you, one of the things I do, there's a few things I subscribe to that contributes to my health. So I subscribe to The Economist. I do their online version of it, and that's an investment. It's $100 a year, but that helps me in my media diet, and that's part of what nutritionists will tell you. Is they say if you want to eat better, you got to be willing to pay a little more. So I also subscribe to there's a free version of iBethel TV. I actually pay for the paid version of that. I'll order educational books. And part of what I do is I'll spend time, and I would encourage you to spend time. It doesn't have to be on Sunday, anytime, but what nutritionists teach you is you need to prepare meals, and whenever you prepare meals, you need to prepare a bunch at a time, because it takes a lot of work to prepare a healthy meal. So you cook for 2 or 3 days. So my wife is actually really good at this. So she'll prepare meals, and she'll make a plan for the whole week. But what I can do for media is I'll spend 30 minutes, or it's actually less than that, preparing and downloading my nutritious media for each week. So that way, whenever I get in the car, I have some great stuff to listen to. So that's the summary. So what you're going to do is you're going to fill in this document. These bullet points, you're going to replace all these bullet points with your own bullet points. So I want to see your own bullet points. I want you to identify what's going to be your tools and routines. Here's the things you do. Some things may already be there. So other things are just ideas of things you're going to do. And what I want you to do is I want you to try to do this. Whatever you commit to, do it for a week. Don't list that you're going to do everything in the world and don't do it. Part of your score on this assignment is going to be coming up with a good plan. Part of your score is going to be, did you do your whole plan? There's going to be grace. I'm not going to be like, okay, you made one mistake, and I don't want people, being concerned about that. But if you put 40 items on your list and you do one, then you haven't done a good, media nutrition plan. And the reason why I'm having you do this, any nutritionist that wants to be a good nutritionist, they need to be following a nutrition plan themselves. So you're going to be a media nutritionist at your church. You're going to be a new media nutritionist. One of the students in this course said he was just teaching some youth these ideas. you can do that. Um, so, but to do that, you have to come up with your own plan. You have to live this out, right? So then after you do that, what I want you to do is I want you to do a log just like you did before, and I want you to describe what you did for the day exactly like you did before, but I want you to also list, did you follow your boundaries? Did you follow your goals, for those days? If you broke your boundaries, your goals, list it out. I'm not going to penalize you on that. I'm going to penalize you if you said you did 40 and you only got 2, right? But list out your goals, get through your 7 days, and one of the tabs in the spreadsheet is actually a comparison of and you're gonna track it again in your spreadsheet, and you're gonna do it on the plan. And actually, this is an old version. Let me see if I can find a newer version. Um, but you're going to okay, here it is. You're going to track your media again, and again, where I want you to focus is on the hours by nutritional value. These sections can be helpful, but they're secondary. Now, some of you had problems trying to get all the different media things to line up. The idea behind it is that if if you are going through and saying, I spent 8 hours in media on a given day, or in this case 13.75 hours, for each of these sections it should show 13.75 hours. So for any day, if you said you did, by media type you had 8 hours, it should also be by content type by 8 hours. Now, my view is I want you to focus on the nutritional value section. If you don't have time to do the other sections, don't do that. Same thing with the plan. I want you to focus on the nutritional value section. The other part I would say you can do, almost for extra credit, but you don't have to do. But what you're going to do is there's actually a before and after section. So there's your plan total, and then there's the difference. So the idea, assuming that you got your media nutrition plan right the first time, then I want you to be able to look at what's the difference between being on a diet and not on a diet is basically the idea. So again, if you have questions, you can send me a message in the course. So with that, I want to conclude with one of my favorite, I guess it's poem stories out there, which is illustrative of okay, both having these boundaries, but also having what people call rituals. What a ritual is for an addict, it's going somewhere where you think you might actually mess up. And usually that's what it is. It's toying with, messing up. So, and I'll read you this story. So it's I walk down the street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault. It takes forever to find a way out. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. It still takes me a long time to get out. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it. It is there. I still fall in. It is a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. I walk down the same street. There is a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. I walk down another street. This is the story of recovery, right? So you keep going down this street, and ultimately, what you do at the end is you have boundaries. First you have a small boundary. You say, I'm going to walk down the same street, but I'm going to walk around it. But the big boundary is saying I'm going to walk down a different street. So that's basically what this week is about. So